our history. Buildings and people and memories and dreams. Who better to tell us than those who were there? There's so much to learn from the stories they'll share.
Living history. Living history.
Hello, and welcome to Living History with Ted Goldsboro. Today we're honored to have with us Mr. David Byerly, who's the son of a longtime Lower Merion High School teacher named Russell Byerly. And we're also going to be talking about a very famous Lower Merion basketball coach named Andy Anderson. His real name was William, but they called him Andy Anderson. So thank you, Mr. Byerly, for being with us today.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we'll start in by talking about the Byerly family. And your grandfather was?
Jacob
Byerly. And where was he from, or where did he live?
Phoenixville, Pennsylvania.
Uh-huh.
And he was a Spanish-American War veteran.
Uh-huh.
And I had 4 aunts. My father had 4 younger sisters. My father was the oldest of the 5 children, and he worked in a Phoenix Iron Works, my grandfather. And I remember them very well because I would go up on Sundays. Once in a while we'd have Sunday dinner, and my grandmother was probably the best cook on the planet. And everything was always set out, and my grandfather was very hard of hearing, but none of his grandchildren ever left. He didn't give you $1 or $2. We all got something on the way out, you know.
Yeah.
But he got burned over an enormous part of his body in the ironworks with a hot steel. But he recovered, and he later worked for the highway department in Phoenixville. And when they went to him, they said, "Sue them." He said, "You don't bite the hand that feeds you." And he wouldn't sue them, but that was good.
Now, your father was born in what year?
My father was born in 1899, I believe.
1899.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when he was a kid, he grew up in Phoenixville?
He grew up in Phoenixville with, he had several friends, and the man that owned the Army-Navy store was a working town, was named Cone. And the Cone boys, they all grew up with my father, plus other boys there, but he stayed in touch with Mr. and Mrs. Cone. They lived in an apartment right above this big store where it was just lined from the top to the bottom with working clothes, you know.
Yeah.
And he was the first one to get a car in Phoenixville, Mr. Cone, so he would take his sons and my father out for a Sunday drive. And but they were very close. There was Harry Cone. He wound up in New York. He was in the garment business. And Babe, he was a pharmacist. He had a drugstore. And the other boy was he was a pediatrician, I believe, the other boy.
That's one characteristic of your father, was that he was very friendly with people, wasn't he?
Lifetime.
Yes.
Yeah, lifetime.
And correspondence, wrote
Constantly,
to many people.
Yeah, I still have boxes of correspondence.
Yes. Later on, as we're talking, we'll get into Mr. Byerly's World War II correspondence with the service people.
Right.
But that illustrates
that
he liked to correspond and be friendly with people. Now, he went to Phoenixville High School, but I believe after maybe 2 years he went to another school. And what was that called?
He went to Williamson Trade School in Media, which was meant for boys that couldn't go, that wouldn't have they wouldn't be going to college. They wanted to be mechanics. And there was a man named Isaiah Williamson. Back in the 1800s, he spent 30 years planning this school, Williamson Trade School, and he had to accumulate the money. So finally accumulated the money, and he had all the plans out, and he purchased a big piece of land there in Media, and he built the buildings, and this was free. Anybody he took there, and every year they graduate 100, 112 mechanics. Now, I've got a Williamson Trade School paper they send out every month, and the graduation class, the alumni are so generous, they've all contributed back. And John Wanamaker was a protege, the merchant was a protege of Isaiah Williamson, and he headed the school for a while, and then they had a Wanamaker school. So after Wanamaker had passed on and time slipped by, people wanted to change the name to Wanamaker School from Williamson. So my father had to round up about 50 alumni, and they called themselves the Crusaders. They corresponded constantly. And finally they got Thomas Burke, Mr. Burke, in Rittenhouse Place here, and they took the case to court, and they had to leave the name Williamson up. It was just a matter of conscience with them, because they'd all received this wonderful education.
Yes. That was one of the challenges that your father had. I mean, he believed in Williamson, and he wanted to stay Williamson.
Very much so in trade schools,
And we have information about that potential lawsuit that Mr. Burke, Thomas Burke, Ardmore attorney, put pressure on, but I believe eventually it was settled without going to court. But there was a threat of a lawsuit.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, your father was quite an athlete, wasn't he?
Yes, very four-star athlete.
Yes, at Williamson.
And Williamson, then he played semi-pro ball, he played semi-pro baseball, he played semi-pro football. They would come in from Ambridge, he would get $500 and a train ticket, but they had to play 2 games. They played Saturday and Sunday. The towns had different teams, Chester, Phoenixville, and he would do that. And he played with Hack Wilson and some top-notch ball players that went on to break National League records, so.
Was Ambridge out near Pittsburgh?
Right, that's in the western part of the state.
Okay, so he'd take the train in to play ball, and he'd get $1,000.
We'd get 500 for the 2 games.
Okay, for 2 games. But considering what pay was in that day, that was good money.
Oh, considering what school teachers were making.
Right.
Sure.
My father was a teacher in 1933, and for the whole year he made $800.
Right.
So this is a weekend, you're making $500.
Yeah, that's correct.
That shows what athletes, even in those days, were making better money than.
But all the towns sold tickets to the games.
Yes,
they could do it.
That was great. I have here some of his athletic records, like at Williamson, the basketball and the football, and he was a captain in 1919, and then it tells he coached girls basketball at Ambridge and so on and so forth. But it's quite extensive, and he became a referee and an umpire in baseball and football.
He umpired, he refereed, and you have it all very good. This was his first coaching job at Ambridge, I think, was girls' basketball team, and he said they had to put the girls in a rowboat because the other school was across the river, and they rowed the girls over.
Wow.
That's the way they did it.
Gee.
But that's where he met my mother. My mother was from Indiana, Pennsildania, and she was teaching there.
At that school?
At that school.
Wow.
So
Isn't
that's
that
how
interesting?
Met.
Yeah. Then we have a photograph of, we think maybe your dad as a referee.
Yeah, I think he's a referee here.
Okay.
But it's hard to tell where that's from. He refereed Episcopal, other schools, not Lower Merion schools.
Yes.
He couldn't referee them. But,
okay.
But he would referee Haverford and local schools.
And this is interesting because you got the old football helmet there and the old-time clothes that people wore. I guess he's got laced-up shoes.
And when he would come in to play ball from Ambridge, I asked him, what did you bring? He said, all you brought was a helmet. They had the uniforms.
Wow, wow. Now, when he was at Williamson, he was on the baseball, football, track, basketball. So he was, you mentioned earlier, 4 sports. He was a letterman in 4 sports.
Yeah, he did them all.
And I read that that was pretty unique, that there were very few people that earned letters in 4 sports.
Yeah, that was, yeah. He loved that school, and we'd go, all the alumni, they'd have an alumni day, and everybody would go out, and the kids would have egg rolls on the yard,
I see.
and they would come from all over for the big alumni day, you know, and we always went to that.
Now, he was a big man, wasn't he? Large in size, and
He was about 6 feet tall.
Oh, okay.
When he got older, if he dropped below 270, he'd worry. We'd go to the 5 and 10 on a penny scale, but that wasn't his weight when he was athletic. He ate a lot of sweets.
Okay.
Liquor, tobacco never crossed his lips, but he ate a lot of candy.
But in addition to being an athlete, he was also on the yearbook staff.
Yeah.
And there was another Lower Merion person, and I wonder if you could tell who that was. Mr. Barsby.
Oh, yeah, that was my woodshop teacher.
And so both Byerly and Barsby were at Williamson at the same time.
Yeah, they were in the same class. But Mr. Zuloff, I think, was a graduate of Williamson.
Oh, yeah.
Lower Merion, we had a top-notch school district, of course, they still do. But they hired a lot of Williamson graduates for teachers.
For the sake of the public, Mr. Zuloff was an auto shop teacher in the technical division at Lower Merion.
And I think Mr. McGrath was the...
Oh, Mr. McGrath. Did he go too?
He went to Williamson, yeah.
Wow.
But he was a little older than they. He was too older than them.
Well, he became principal of the technical...
He was a machine shop teacher, and then when they built the vocational school, he was in charge there.
All right. We had an earlier interview about a year ago with a graduate of the technical division in the Lower Merion School District. And Lower Merion was quite ahead of the times.
Very much so.
In having a technical division. Now, Mr. Byerly, we got to take a break now, but we'll be right back after this short break.
Good.
This is Ted Goldsboro with Living History with Mr. Byerly.
Okay.